Hey guys, Grandy Tamayas here, and welcome back to another installment of Alvin and the Chipmunks Elaborations. And for today's topic, I wanted to bring up something that I've been meaning to talk about for a while, and it's in regards to the production of the CGI series. Now, I've talked about concept art a few times on this channel, such as a few pieces based on the April 4th, 1985 draft of the Chipmunk Adventure screenplay, and way back in this channel's early days, I did a now outdated and really crappy video about the early designs of the CGI series Chipmunks. But a few months ago, I was made aware of a gallery of concept art from that series, which I'll link in the description, and it has a bunch of pieces depicting locations, characters, costumes, and objects from the later seasons of the show. It's really neat to see the variations that were considered for the designs of Simon and Jeanette's robots, Gizmo and Zila, as well as the matte paintings of some of the interior locations and their various elements. However, there's one particular piece that really caught my attention, and if you somehow avoided seeing the thumbnail and video title, I'll give you one guess as to why. That's right, people. My and many others' wish of seeing more individuals of the Chipmunks and Chipettes species was almost realized, as evident from this concept art depicting a wild chipmunk. While I can't say that I'm surprised how a wild chipmunk would dress like, more on that later, the fact that something like this made it as far as concept art has me wondering, what was the purpose? Now, just a heads up, I did get in contact with the artist to try and learn more about this piece. However, the artist asked that I not share anything from our email conversation out of concern for spreading misinformation. I know that might seem odd, but you're going to have to trust me on this when I say that even the artist does not know much about this piece, like the name and personality of this character, or why they are dressed the way that they are. So I want to preface the remainder of this elaboration by saying that anything that I say about this artwork is pure speculation. Unless we get word from Bagdasarian Productions themselves, which is extremely unlikely, the wild chipmunk is going to remain one of those fandom mysteries. Now, the first thing that you probably noticed is that this is not using the design of the Chipmunk characters in the series, but is instead in the style of the live-action movies, and seems to use Brittany as a base. My guess is that since Janice Carmen had a hand in the design process for the live-action Chipettes, Bagdasarian Productions still had those art assets and lended them to the artist to base the wild chipmunk on. And had this idea not been canned, further concept art would have been created for this character in the ALVINNN art style. But in the movieverse style, this definitely makes me think of fan-made original characters that are common across the internet. Another thing that I want to note is that the concept art gallery that this came from includes stuff from all the way until the end of the show, like Amy and her prosthetic legs from Run Amy Run, but also characters like Anita from Season 3's Talking Teddy's Revenge, and the baby chimpanzee from Season 4's Chimp Mania. So the wild chipmunk could have appeared anytime between mid-Season 3 and late Season 5, which is a huge gap, about half the show. If I had to guess, probably more towards Season 5, since that's when the show seemed to start delivering on a few things that fans were wanting, like tighter continuity and new recurring characters. And I wouldn't put it past Bagdasarian at this time to have made the wild chipmunk a recurring character like with Gizmo. To talk more about the design variations themselves, 3 of them are the same beige-colored dress with a rose of varying size and a blue ribbon around the hair. The first of the other 2 has a sandy, muted yellow-colored dress with lighter spots throughout, a yellow flower on top of her hair, and a yellow bow towards the end of her French-braided ponytail. The last one also has a French-braided ponytail with a bow, except the bow is slightly larger and orange, no flower, and has a green dress with lighter spots throughout it as well. Let me know which one's your favorite. I like this one the best with how the ribbon wraps all the way around the hair and the top of the head. The attire overall just feels very rural, like the wild chipmunk lives an Amish lifestyle. In fact, that's a good segue to talking about the purpose of this character. Because Vinny has, for the last 40 years, been one of the few chipmunks that we've seen besides the main cast, there's been this belief in the fandom that in any new continuity, if there are other chipmunks that exist, they live the same Amish lifestyle as her. We even saw a few chipmunks like this in the Easter special, so they may have had ties to Vinny. And while other such chipmunk characters like Harry and the Tweet Tweet tribe deviate from this, they didn't impact the fan perception of how chipmunks outside of civilization live, since Vinny's role as the chipmunks' mother made her more memorable. Even though I would argue that the possibility of tribal chipmunks like the Tweet Tweet tribe in the movie or CGI series universes should be taken into fan speculation more often. And by accident or not, this artwork kind of validates that perception surrounding Vinny. Even the name, Wild Chipmunk, does suggest this character came from beyond human-dominated civilization. Now, I doubt that this is actually a CGI series version of Vinny. I suppose that it's not disprovable at this point, but I would have expected her to look closer to how her original 80s counterpart did. That, and I presume that this Wild Chipmunk would be closer to the main characters, given the resemblance to Brittany. Which again, is just a base, so the Wild Chipmunk would have received a completely original model when the time would have come to animate her for the show. Had that happened, I think that she could have been used as a bridge of sorts to help introduce us to even more new Chipmunk characters, as wherever there's one Wild Chipmunk, there have to be others, right? Then again, the fact that this is the only such character that we currently know of from concept art could suggest that this character lives alone. And it would have taken more time and money to create even more chipmunks, so we probably would not have gotten crowds of them, as there's also an upper limit on how many models can be rendered in a scene. Besides, that would be a lot of new voices to come up with, without hiring more voice actors. Since the Bagdasarian family did almost all the characters on the show, unlike the 80s series, which employed some of the best voice talent in the business to voice miscellaneous characters. Maybe I should do a video about that at some point. If I had to guess, either Janice or Vanessa would have voiced the Wild Chipmunk. But one question still remains. Why didn't the Wild Chipmunk make it onto the show? If Bagdasarian got this far with the design, I can only presume it got scrapped for a reason intrinsic to the idea of incorporating the character. For reasons already touched on in this video, and my older ones, additional Chipmunk characters would be one of the most difficult concepts to justify introducing into the series, or rather, reintroducing into the franchise. In part because it would open up a Pandora's box of having to introduce even more new Chipmunks to keep stories fresh, to the point of overshadowing the title characters. Not to mention the pressure that would come with audiences questioning why there couldn't be more Chipmunk characters if the series were to draw attention to that. Simply put, what would be so special about Alvin, Simon, Theodore, and the Chipettes if there were now other Chipmunks who could talk, sing, and dance? Now, this on its own wouldn't guarantee making the main characters irrelevant. I mean, just look at franchises like Sonic the Hedgehog and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're titled after their main characters, but they still manage to tell interesting stories about other characters without diluting the appeal of the title ones. And it might be because the novelty of the main characters meeting these newcomers shows us a different side to them. But of course, ALVINNN and the Chipmunks doesn't treat itself as an anthology where stories heavily involving side characters can be picked up where they were left off. For the most part, anyway. Like I said, the series showed improvement on that towards the end of its lifespan, and had Season 6 and 7 not been cancelled, maybe we could have seen this Wild Chipmunk come to fruition. I mean, the scrapped Season 6 storyboard did suggest that after the tour, episodes were still going to take place in Santa Barbara, as normal, so this Wild Chipmunk could have been native to one of the forested areas that we've seen throughout the series. Whereas if Season 6 and possibly 7 had constantly been on the road with the Chipmunks and Chipettes being on tour, it's debatable how likely it is that they would have come across this Wild Chipmunk. Maybe if they had downtime between concerts, they could stop by a forest for some recreation and encounter the Wild Chipmunk. Or if they were constantly in urban areas for their performances, I doubt that a Wild Chipmunk would have shown up for a concert being around crowds of humans. Again, with this chipmunk being wild, I could understand her being afraid of us tall, sparsely haired apes. And with all that we've done to the planet, especially forested areas, I don't think that wild chipmunks would have a lot of nice things to say about us. Or perhaps we could see this wild chipmunk concept revived in a future reboot. Possibly a series, as even though the next reboot is most likely going to be a movie, I think that they'd want to focus on the legacy characters to introduce them to a new generation. And if future films ever did delve into non-main chipmunk characters, they would probably build that concept from the ground up instead of whatever the creative trajectory was of this scrapped wild chipmunk. Really, I just need this franchise to bring back miscellaneous chipmunk characters sooner rather than later, because I think that it's been hurt by their absence more so than it would have been by the risks of actually having them. I mean, the last time that we ever had a character like that was the Chipmunks' grandfather in the Easter special. And that's only been 30 years. Feel free to let me know in the comments. Would you have liked to see the wild chipmunk in the CGI series? What do you think her role in an episode would have been about? And why do you think that she was ultimately scrapped? Don't forget that if you want to leave a suggestion for future topics of this Elaboration series, you can leave that in the comments as well. I'm very picky about which ones I'll do, but if it's something like this that I can go into a lot of detail about, I'll consider it. And if you want to follow me outside of my videos, you can join my Discord server or follow me on Twitter. Links to both will be in the description. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed, have a nice day, and thank you for your time.